The world stood still when the news of Angie Stone's passing spread like wildfire. Fans, friends, and fellow artists were left in shock. Social media was flooded with tributes, memories, and disbelief. But no one was prepared for what happened at her funeral. You won't believe how the day unfolded, and trust me, you'll want to hear every word of this. It wasn't just a farewell, it was an emotional storm that no one saw coming. And the craziest part, the moment her daughter stepped on stage, everything changed. Angie Stone wasn't just a singer. She was a movement, a legend, a voice that healed broken hearts and gave strength to those who needed it most. From her early days as one of hip-hop's first female pioneers to her reign as the queen of neo-soul, she built a legacy that was impossible to ignore. But behind the fame, behind the music, there was a different story, a story of pain, sacrifice, and battles no one saw. And this is where it gets interesting. Her life wasn't just about hit records and sold-out shows. Angie faced struggles that would have broken most people, from industry fights for respect to personal betrayals and health struggles. She carried more weight than anyone realized. But the most heartbreaking part of her journey, the complicated and painful relationship with her daughter, Diamond. Their bond was deep, but it was also filled with tension. Public fights, private apologies, and a history of wounds that never fully healed. It all led to the moment that left everyone speechless at Angie's funeral. When the day of the funeral arrived, emotions ran high. The room was filled with famous faces, close friends, and devoted fans. Everyone had come to say goodbye to the woman who had given the world so much through her music. But no one knew what was about to happen. As Diamond walked towards the stage, the room fell silent. This was the moment everyone had been waiting for. Would she break down? Would she speak at all? The history between them had been messy, and many wondered if she even had anything left to say. Then she started talking. Her voice was steady, but the pain was clear. She didn't sugarcoat anything. She talked about the love, the fights, the misunderstandings, and the regrets. My mother was my first heartbreak, she admitted, and you could hear the gasps in the crowd. But then, she added, and my greatest teacher. In that moment, everything shifted. This wasn't just a daughter saying goodbye to her mother. This was a confession, a realization, and an emotional release that no one expected. But here's the shocking part. She wasn't done. After pouring her heart out, she did something no one saw coming. She sang. And not just any song, she chose one of Angie's most beloved tracks, a song that had meant everything to her mother. The first note hit, and the room froze. The rawness in her voice, the pain in every lyric, it was almost too much to bear. Tears streamed down her face, but she kept singing. And by the time she reached the final chorus, the entire room was in tears. But this was just the beginning, because what happened next would change the way the world remembered Angie Stone forever. As Diamond's voice trembled through the final lyrics, the weight of the moment settled over the room. No one expected this. Fans had seen the headlines, read the stories, and witnessed the years of tension between mother and daughter. But in that moment, none of it mattered. What mattered was the raw truth. The kind of truth that doesn't need to be explained, just felt. And as the last note faded, something happened that no one saw coming. The silence was deafening. People sat frozen, some wiping away tears, others staring in disbelief. Then, from the front row, a family member stood up. At first, it seemed like they were just moved by the song, but then they spoke. "There's something you all don't know," they said, their voice shaking. Something Angie wanted to share before she left this world. The tension in the room shifted instantly. What was being hidden? What had Angie kept secret? And why was it being revealed now, in front of everyone? This is where it gets interesting, because as it turned out, Angie's final months had been more complicated than anyone realized. She had made peace with some things, but not everything. There were old wounds that hadn't healed, apologies that had never been spoken, and regrets she carried till her last breath. And one of them, it was connected to Diamond. Behind closed doors, mother and daughter had shared moments that no one knew about. Private conversations, late night talks, the kind of exchanges that were raw, painful, but necessary. But here's the craziest part. Angie had recorded some of them, not for the world, not for publicity, but for Diamond, to hear after she was gone. And now, one of those recordings was about to be played. A hush fell over the crowd as someone pulled out their phone and pressed play. Angie's voice filled the room, weaker than people remembered, but unmistakable. "Diamond," she said, her tone softer than anyone had ever heard before. "I know we didn't always get it right. I know I hurt you, and I know you hurt me too, but you were always enough. I need you to hear that. You were always enough." The words hit like a wave. People gasped. Some covered their mouths in shock. Diamond stood frozen, her hands shaking. This wasn't just a goodbye. It was a confession, a closure that had come too late. But there was more, because in that same recording, Angie revealed something that no one, not even Diamond, had known. A final wish, a request that would change everything. And when Diamond heard it, she had only one thing to say: "I can't believe she waited until now to tell me this." But what was it? And why had Angie kept it a secret until the very end? The room felt heavier than before. Angie's voice, fragile yet filled with emotion, echoed in everyone's mind. Diamond stood there, her face frozen in shock. What had her mother just revealed? Why had she waited until the end to say it? And more importantly, what was Diamond supposed to do now? Let me tell you, this is where it gets even more intense. Because Angie's final request wasn't something simple. It wasn't just about forgiveness or love. It was about unfinished business. Something she had carried with her for years, but had never spoken about publicly. And now she was leaving it in Diamond's hands. In the recording, Angie took a deep breath before continuing. "There's something I never told you," she said, her voice unsteady. "Something I kept from you because I thought I was protecting you, but you deserve to know the truth." Diamond's hands tightened into fists. What truth? What had her mother been hiding all these years? Then Angie said the words that sent chills down Diamond's spine. "You always thought our fights were just about us. But baby, there were people who didn't want us to make peace. People who had a hand in keeping us apart." The crowd murmured in confusion. What was Angie saying? That their rocky relationship wasn't just because of personal differences, that someone else had been pulling the strings behind the scenes? Diamond's mind raced. It didn't make sense. She had spent years believing that their tension was just a result of their stubbornness, their past mistakes. But if what Angie was saying was true, then everything she thought she knew was a lie. But here's the shocking part. Angie didn't just hint at it. She named names, industry executives, friends, even people within their own family. She claimed that there were people who had benefited from keeping them apart, people who had fed their anger, fueled their misunderstandings, and made sure their bond remained broken. But why? What could they possibly gain from that? Diamond's breath came in short, shaky gasps. All this time, she had blamed herself. She had carried the guilt, the resentment, the pain. And now she was hearing that maybe, just maybe, it hadn't been entirely their fault. Maybe there had been hands in the dark, pushing them apart for reasons she didn't yet understand. The room was silent, every eye locked on Diamond, waiting for her reaction. Would she believe it? Would she go looking for answers? Or would she walk away, refusing to open old wounds? But before she could even process it, someone from the crowd spoke up. "That's not the whole story," they said. "There's something else you don't know." And just like that, the mystery deepened. Because Angie's recording wasn't the only hidden truth. Someone else had a secret to share, one that could change everything. Diamond's heart pounded as she turned toward the voice that had just spoken. The tension in the room thickened. Who was it? And what did they know that she didn't? The air felt electric, as if everyone was holding their breath, waiting for the next bombshell to drop. A woman stepped forward from the crowd, someone Diamond recognized immediately. It was her mother's oldest friend, someone who had been around since the beginning of Angie's career. Her hands trembled as she looked at Diamond. Then, at the screen where Angie's voice had just played, "Your mother wasn't lying," she said, "but there's something even she didn't know." You won't believe what happened next, because what this woman was about to reveal wasn't just about Angie and Diamond's relationship. It was about something much bigger, something that had been buried for years, hidden behind contracts, industry, politics, and whispered conversations that were never meant to see the light of day. The woman hesitated, as if debating whether to say it out loud. Then she took a deep breath. There were people in the industry who saw your mother as a threat, not just because of her talent, but because of what she knew. The room erupted in whispers. A threat? What did Angie know? And why had it cost her so much? Diamond's mind spun. She had always known her mother faced challenges in the industry. Angie had spoken about it in bits and pieces, how the industry had tried to control her, how they had stolen from her, how they had tried to erase her contributions to music. But she had never mentioned anything like this. "What are you saying?" Diamond's voice was barely above a whisper. The woman's eyes filled with sorrow. "I'm saying your mother was fighting battles you never even knew about. And some of those battles cost her more than just her career. They cost her peace, her relationships, and maybe even her health." This is where it gets interesting, because if what she was saying was true, then Angie's struggles weren't just personal, they were strategic. Someone, or maybe multiple people, had wanted her to stay in the shadows, to stay silent. And if Angie had known this truth, maybe she would have fought even harder. Diamond felt a chill run down her spine. "Who were they?" she asked. The woman hesitated. "That's not for me to say," she admitted. "But I can tell you this, your mother was planning to speak out. She wanted to tell her truth before it was too late. And now that she's gone, that responsibility falls on you." The words hit Diamond like a weight. Her whole life, she had fought against her mother's legacy, tried to carve out her own path. But now, standing here in front of people who had loved Angie, who had followed her story, she realized she had a choice. She could walk away and let the past stay buried. Or she could pick up where her mother left off and finally expose the truth. But before she could decide, someone else in the crowd spoke. And what they said next changed everything. The room fell silent again as another voice emerged from the crowd. This time it was a man, a former producer who had worked with Angie in the early days of her solo career. His expression was grim, his voice low, as if he wasn't sure he should be speaking at all. But then he looked directly at Diamond, and what he said sent chills down her spine. "You need to listen to the last recording your mother made," he said. Diamond's breath caught in her throat. "What recording?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The producer glanced around nervously, as if checking to see who was listening. She left a voice recording. It wasn't part of the documentary. She didn't want the public to hear it. Not yet. But she made sure I had a copy. The shock in Diamond's eyes was clear. This was something she hadn't been prepared for. Her mother had spoken her truth in so many ways, through music, interviews, and personal confessions. But if she had left behind a final message, that meant there was something she never got the chance to say. Let me tell you, what happened next was nothing short of jaw-dropping. The producer pulled out his phone, his fingers shaking slightly as he scrolled through his files. The entire room watched in eerie silence. Then, with a deep breath, he hit play. At first, there was only static. Then Angie's voice broke through, tired but firm. "If you're hearing this, it means I didn't get to say everything I needed to. And if I'm gone, that means someone is going to try and rewrite my story." The crowd gasped. Diamond clutched the edges of the podium, her nails digging into the wood. "This industry has never been kind to women like me," Angie continued. "They take our voices, our stories, and when they're done with us, they erase us. But I won't let that happen. Not this time." Diamond's hands trembled. She had known her mother was fearless, but this was something else. Angie's voice wavered slightly. "There are things I kept from the world, things I never even told my family, but If you're listening, then you deserve to know the truth about the deals they forced me into, about the money they stole, about the people who smiled in my face while making sure I never got what I was owed. The tension in the room was suffocating. No one dared to move. Then came the part that left Diamond completely stunned. But the craziest part? Angie's voice dropped almost to a whisper. It wasn't just the industry that betrayed me. It was someone close to me, someone I trusted. The recording cut off abruptly. Diamond's entire world shifted in that moment. Someone close to her mother had betrayed her. Someone in that very room, maybe? She looked up, scanning the faces of those around her. Some looked shocked. Others looked nervous. This was no longer just about honoring her mother's legacy. This was about uncovering the truth. And Diamond knew one thing for sure. She wouldn't stop until she found out exactly who had betrayed Angie Stone.